And now we come to our ordinance public hearings this evening. The first is 2016-38, an ordinance by the Municipality of Princeton establishing the Civil Rights Commission and amending the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974, and the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. And before we open up the public hearing on this, earlier today, Council President Liverman and myself met with members of the Subcommittee of Human Services that have been working on this ordinance with us, and they recommended a slight change to the ordinance, which I checked with Ms. Trischka ahead of the meeting. It is not substantive, and it's part of subsection D, 2F, on the third page of the ordinance, and it would be removing the phrase "in the community." It's removing the phrase "in the community" to specify the list of mediators. So it would go from the now I don't have the exact language in front of me, but do you have it? Can you read it? I have it. Yeah. Currently, the last sentence of that subsection F reads, "The municipality shall endeavor to maintain a list of qualified mediators in the community, but not affiliated with the municipality or Civil Rights Commission, etc." With the change, it would read, "The municipality shall endeavor to maintain a list of qualified mediators, but not affiliated with the municipality or Civil Rights Commission." So that way, it would expand basically the list of available mediators. It would no longer be confined to mediators in the community, just qualified mediators. Right, and the recommendation for that was the state apparently has some mediators that offer their services for free, and there might be other mediators who are nearby, but not technically in the community. And just to confirm what Mayor Lempert said, this is not a substantial change to the ordinance that would require reintroduction. It can be adopted tonight if that's the council's desire. Okay, thank you. And then before we get started, I just also wanted to direct everybody to some things that were put together after the packet went out. Everybody should have received up here the flow chart that I believe there were copies in the back also. And then also a revised set of guidelines, policies, and procedures. And this is not what we will be voting on tonight. This does need to be adopted by council, but there'll be a resolution. I was hoping we could do it all tonight, but there still might need to be some changes with the policies and procedures in this form, so I'm recommending that we pass the ordinance tonight, or we vote on the ordinance tonight, and then we have the policies and procedures in front of us as a resolution at the next meeting. Okay.
I guess I have a process question.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the questions we had last time and some of the questions that people have directed to me in the interim have been about the procedures.
Right.
To the point that people who are advocating for the Civil Rights Commission are advocating for it if the procedures are a certain way and not if they're a certain other way. So is one of our options to delay adopting the ordinance until we know whether the procedures are going to come out the way people want them to?
Flow chart.
Well, we could do that. I mean, the other thing is I think with our, certainly with the subcommittee that we met with this morning, I think we're very close. It's just not all of the things we had discussed actually fully made it in this draft document, and because a lot of the stuff was last minute, I would recommend, just because we're here tonight, that we discuss it and we get it to where it's close. And if people are ready to move on the ordinance, we can do that. And then we'll have the policies and procedures for the next meeting. If council would rather wait on the whole thing, we can wait on the whole thing, but we have a lot of people who are out here tonight.
And I'm not saying table it now. I'm simply saying, that in terms of our process options, that is one of our options. When we get through the discussion tonight, we can choose to table the ordinance if we think
You
that's
can
the right.
always have that option,
Right.
sure.
But why, Patrick, just so I understand what your reasoning is, because
the ordinance is actually operationalized by the procedures, and
so you don't want to pass one without knowing.
and it's I'm more relaying what people have told me who are deeply invested in the process and in bringing this into being. All right,
Thank you.
It just seems to me that for me personally as a member of council, if the people advocating for this who have worked on it for 2 years are not satisfied with it and in fact would prefer we vote against it, I'd like to know that. And if the reason is because the operationalization of it in the ordinance by the procedures which are not part of the ordinance, if that's actually the problem, I'd like to understand that before we actually vote on the ordinance so that we're dealing with it all together.
And I just
Well, I would too.
I also want to clarify what I just said too. I don't think we can do it at the next meeting, because at the next meeting, if we want to move on some of the neighborhood character and zoning ordinances I just mentioned, I want to make sure we have enough time to do that at the next meeting, and that has to be done at the next meeting because of the timing with a planning board, with an ordinance that needs to go to the planning board for review. The timing is very tight with that. So if we postpone this tonight, I'm not sure if we're going to have a delayed discussion at a future meeting. I mean, I'd like to get it to the point where if we have a subsequent meeting, there doesn't need to be a lot of discussion and it's a fast item, or we're going to have to postpone it into December.
Well, can I say just to help Councilman Simon out, is that we've just discussed some of the items that he may have concerns with between the group and ourselves, and I think that if we just maybe can go over the areas of concern, we can move forward tonight. I don't see that we're too far apart on some items, and we're so I. Well, I don't want to, because I would hate to keep postponing and postponing and postponing. We need to put something on the books.
Well, I'm not proposing that right now. I'm saying let's see where we end up, and then see what our options are.
So, is there any other discussion from council before we open up the public hearing? Oh, right, yeah, okay, then, yeah, do you want to start, Mark, by going through the flow chart?
Okay, first I'm going to walk you through the flow chart, which is the complaint component of the ordinance. And we're going to start here, which is any complaint that's made about a public official in terms of discrimination or is in reference to employment. We'll go through where you see these orange highlights here. It either can come in, and if they know the right procedures, they will forward that to the affirmative action officer. If it comes through any of the other means and it actually goes into human services, they'll then direct it to the affirmative action officer. Anything that's related to a municipal official will be dealt with in accordance with our policies and procedures. That being said, now let's talk about the process itself. Based on the comments that we received, we developed a number of ways in which you can initiate the process. One would be a walk-in from Human Services. Two, it can come from or with the assistance of a member of the CRC. Three, would have forms available in the clerk's office or on the municipal website. All of those, any of these methods then will culminate into the Human Services offices, at which time they will do the fact-finding, first providing education to the individual that comes in, reviewing the complaints, giving the complainants their rights and procedures. And one thing that's important that we change in the process to make it very clear The Director of Human Services is not a gatekeeper, rather is just a facilitator through the process and does not make any decision of how any complaint would move forward. So what the Human Services in the next box conducts fact-finding, which is simply contacting the other party involved, getting their side of the story. There's then a meeting between the Human Services Director and the complainant in which they review the results of the fact-finding in terms of what has happened. We added, based on meeting this morning, at that meeting there is an option to have a member of the CRC present at that meeting. At that point, any complaint, the complainant has the ability at that point to direct what they want to do. If they're satisfied after they receive the information from the fact-finding and reviewed, the process ends. If not, they have three options. And that could be to go to outside mediation, go to informal conflict resolution, or pursue any legal options that they have available to them. If they pursue the legal actions, that process ends. It then goes to whatever legal process, Superior Court or the NJEOC. If they choose to go to informal conflict resolution, which is through the Civil Rights Commission, the Human Services Department will then contact the other party and determine if they would be agreeable. This is all voluntary. If they agree to that process, all this information is then forwarded to the CRC, and they will conduct an informal dispute resolution process. If there is not an agreement, the process ends at that point. If they decide they would like to do outside mediation, again, Human Services Director would then speak to both parties to determine if there's an agreement to move forward. If there is agreement, the information is forwarded to the mediator. The mediator will then be responsible for contacting both parties and arranging a mediation, and that will be completely outside of the municipal process. If they say no, the process ends at that point. And this just runs you through the process. We made a number of changes based on the meetings and our conversations from the last meeting.
Are there any questions? Mr. Simon?
Yeah, I have two questions. I'm sorry, I think these should go before public comment. So the first is, we currently have the Civil Rights Commission in the ordinance giving a report on their annual activities.
Can you make sure you're in your mic?
Sure. In the ordinance itself, it looks like 1F, I'm sorry, what section? It's page 180 of our packet. The commission shall prepare and present an annual report of the commission's activities to the mayor and council. But in the flow chart you just gave us, a lot of civil rights complaints can go through Human Services without hitting the commission. Are we going to get a report that is encompassing all of the details? And if so, do we need to modify the ordinance to make that clear?
And I believe it's in the modified procedures, you'll see a new section that was added that talks about, and this does not include, we did not include council, but the CRC would receive monthly reports that will provide general information about the complaints that go through the process. And again, I think if you wanted to make a modification.
Yeah. Okay, I see it. Yeah, that reads, because I don't think people here, not everybody has that, so I should
It should be in the back of the room.
And can people watching?
No.
It is online. This amended procedure is online, so people can
Yes.
access it? Okay, fine. Then, but it does say the Human Services Director will provide general report to the Civil Rights Commission. All right, so that was part one. Part two is, or my second question, I'm sorry, is we're directing all complaints against municipal officials to the affirmative action officer.
Correct.
Does that mean we are taking away complaints that currently go to the Police Internal Affairs Unit and putting them there? Or are we keeping Police Internal Affairs has their existing authority and this is all other?
They have their existing authority. This would be all other. It would go through them. If it was a police matter, it would be referred to Internal Affairs to go through their process. If it's a...
And so I guess my question to the attorney is that clear from the ordinance, or do we need to put language in to clarify it? Because I read this as it all goes to the affirmative action officer.
Nick, are you paying attention? Are you paying attention, Nick?
Yeah, I was wondering the same thing.
I don't see how complaints about the police go to the affirmative action.
But,
The issue is just they would be routed through them, I think, right?
Yeah, by statute, complaints against the police officer have to be handled through the internal affairs process, which is governed by the prosecutor's office and the attorney general.
Well, create another level of,
The way I would see the process, the affirmative action officer would almost be just, instead of creating two processes, if it got to the affirmative action officer, they would then just refer it down in internal affairs or go through our personnel policies and procedures if there's a violation there. It's just, rather than having a bunch of different ways in which people can use the process, it just makes it clearer to me. And then it'll just be-
I have a question about that. So if somebody makes a complaint and it goes to the affirmative action officer, can the affirmative action officer file the report with the police, or does it have to be the person who the incident happened to? Because this might be a way, if it allows the other process, it might allow more people to come forward if that's
Absolutely. Anybody at any time, by any means, can file an internal affairs complaint on anyone's behalf. Third party, email, anonymous, phone call, however it can be done, we take that complaint. So literally any means, they can write a handwritten note and put it in the mail, give it to the dispatch, however they want to do it, we take that complaint.
And so this is probably covered then because the personnel policies would cover where police complaints go.
Correct.
But this is making it seem as though now the complaints by the public are going to come to our affirmative action officer, which doesn't.
If I don't read the ordinance that way, and I don't think it's setting up some new process. I think this is more direction to the Civil Rights Commission. Someone goes to the Civil Rights Commission with a complaint against a Princeton employee or officer, that has to get referred over to the affirmative action officer, and that person's going to know where to send it from there. It doesn't bypass anything. In fact, I see this more as simplifying things. You don't want an ordinance that says, all right, well, if it's against a police officer, you have to go make your complaint over here. But if it's against, somebody in the clerk's office, you have to file your complaint over here. I think this is just saying, it doesn't say at the Civil Rights Commission.
I think of it as sort of like no wrong door is what we're trying to establish, that there's many people can knock on many doors and they will open up a pathway, and then it's on our system to figure out how to handle that complaint properly, not on the complainant to have to figure out how to navigate that, right? And so what you want to do here, and you may have incidences where somebody's had interacted with a police officer and a municipal employee, and you have to tease out the different pieces. And so the point is, you want to have no wrong door. You want to have many places where people can come forward because they may, for a variety of reasons, feel more comfortable with one avenue, with one door than another. This no wrong door is a terminology that's often used for social service programs, that you want to allow people to feel like they can access the government wherever they feel comfortable. And here we're just trying to find more avenues for people to feel comfortable coming in. And so the only question, I think, Trishka, is whether you think we've in any way made it more complicated, because we want to make sure we're obviously properly handling complaints against the police. But assuming that you think that's okay, which is what I think I heard you say, I think what we've done here is improve the process by making it easier for the public to come in.
Yeah, that's certainly, how I'm reading this ordinance, and to me what is particularly important about this provision is that it's saying the Civil Rights Commission will not handle complaints against police officers or municipal employees. That goes somewhere else, but then the other important thing is you've got one point of contact, so as Councilwoman Howard said, members of the public don't have to try to parse and figure out where to go.
Can I just ask, I just also want to be sure and clear that if an employee does go to the affirmative action officer, and if they're not happy or if it's not what they want, resolved, I guess it's a 30-day policy we have within that, and then they can go forward to somewhere else, or how does that work? If
there is, I believe under, and I'm trying to remember, under our complaint process, there are various avenues that they can go to if they went to the affirmative action or they're not happy, and I believe it went all the way up to the personnel committee where they could go for additional relief.
Okay.
I'm struggling with the role of the affirmative action officer simply because, as a layman, not an attorney, I read it differently. I read it as
Patrick,
basically
maybe I can help here, is that I think one thing that came up when the subcommittee on civil, it's currently a subcommittee of human services, and obviously what we would be doing tonight is creating a freestanding commission. One thing that came up in all the research on about creating a civil rights commission was the fact that we lacked an affirmative action officer. So we had a process by which things could be handled, complaints could be handled by the personnel committee, but we actually lacked a municipal affirmative action officer. So one thing that's important, ironically, it's sort of outside of the Civil Rights Commission, because we're saying it's not to handle things that the Civil Rights Commission will handle, but it seemed an important time to fix what was basically an omission in our personnel manual. Is that right, Mark? Am I remembering that correctly?
Yes, and it's also the other thing that we found, this is not something that we made up. We actually pulled this from a model from another community that had their municipal officials going through the affirmative action officer.
So this is an added protection, I think, in terms of the fairness and of how people are treated by municipal employees, an added level, and actually something that we should have done some time ago that got uncovered, but sort of a separate issue from what we're talking about, the core issue we're talking about today.
All right, well, I think that sort of answers a question that's been in the back of my mind that I haven't quite figured out how to voice, but we'll try to do it now, which is we already have a process for people to issue complaints about employees in general. And so what you found in your research and what the subcommittee found in their research is it's actually better for civil rights complaints to have a separate affirmative action officer as opposed to route all complaints through the same process and through the same people.
What we found is other communities that had a civil rights commission, what they did was they made a distinction because municipal employees have to, if there's alleged discrimination, it's a violation of our policies and procedures, they have to go through a separate procedures. And that's how the affirmative action officer can actually kind of manage that process. So that's why it's in there.
Yeah, that's actually not my question. My question is we've already got procedures for handling other types of workplace violations. And what I'm asking is it best practice to split that between a civil rights violation goes this route and all others go through other administrative channels? That's my question.
That was what the research found, was that it
Okay, that's
was
what I
an
was
omission not having that, yes. That you want to have a special process for handling those, and that we need to have an affirmative action officer.
Okay. If there's no more questions, I was going to say, just before we open it up for the public hearing, for people who are just tuning in, who haven't been in the weeds on this for the last many, many months, we've been spending a lot of time talking about the complaint process, but that is not the only purpose of the Civil Rights Commission, and I just don't want that to be lost in our discussion, because my sense is that a lot of the testimony we're going to hear tonight is also focused on the complaint process, and it's appropriate we spend a lot of time on it because it is complicated and we want to get it right, and it's important to get it right. But the other duties of the Civil Rights Commission, as outlined in the ordinance, have to do with public outreach, and another piece of it that I'm just reminded of with Ms. Howard's reminding us how the affirmative action officer was discovered was that we are hopefully going to be getting recommendations from the Civil Rights Commission as to how we as a municipality can improve our internal operations as well. So it's really a commission that will have a three-pronged mission, and even though we're probably going to be focusing on just one of those prongs tonight, all three of them are vitally important. So with that, Mr. Simon?
One more question. This is really for the administrator. Mr. Deschel, assuming we pass this ordinance, whether it's tonight or whenever we fine-tune the language and get it right, if there's any concerns that are overhanging, do you anticipate this requiring any change in staffing or budget, or is this basically creating a volunteer organization with minimal or no financial support from the municipality?
That's what I expect. Little or no support.
The second.
Yes.
I asked this question the last time, and I asked that some semblance of a budget be created, because of course you can't do outreach without some sort of budget. You need materials. And also, we don't give anyone any extra responsibility without also compensating them. So I would assume that whoever takes on the responsibility of being the affirmative action person would also be compensated for that. I don't imagine that that's a volunteer role.
I don't know that I have anything to add on the affirmative action officer issue, but I think on the issue of education and outreach, one thing that's been discussed and perhaps will come up in the public testimony is I think there's a real interest in partnering with a lot of good organizations that already do a lot of work. So I don't think there's an expectation to recreate the wheel on a lot of things, is to leverage a lot of the goodwill in town and elevate it to the level of a municipal entity and highlight these issues. And so I think to that question of resources, the hope would be, and I think when you look at how much some of our boards and commissions do accomplish with little to no resources, I would be hopeful that a lot could be accomplished.
Right. I'm not suggesting it would be a lot, but I think every time we don't account for it at all, we're being disingenuous. And to that point, when you talk about partnering with other organizations, we do have organizations in town that have worked very actively on issues of racism, whether it's the Y or not in our town. And I haven't heard them maybe they are represented tonight, but I haven't heard them joining the hue and cry for a Civil Rights Commission. And I wonder, are we undermining or are we really partnering?
Well, I think, maybe this will come up in the public testimony. Several people I'm looking in the audience, on this working group are actually on the boards of these other organizations. So there's already tremendous cross-fertilization that I think is well represented. I know Letitia's on the board of the Y, Larry Spruill's on the board of NIOT. Everybody, Letitia's on the board of LALDEF. So I think there's already a lot of cross-pollination, but so I see it as complementary.
Oh, okay. All right.